I'm Robert Hannon. It's my pleasure tonight to be in conversation with Nicky Eiseman. As I do most evenings, I have a couple of house cleaning items to refer you to. Cell phones, if you have them, put them in airplane mode, please, or silence them. And then it is the ultimate of the Tall Timber series, but not for the summer festivities that Michelle's got planned. Tomorrow night in this venue, Stewart Care and Orthopedist will offer insights into 30-minute health transformations, tips and benefits for a daily exercise routine. That's on the Healthy Living series. On the Discover Alaska series on Wednesday in this venue, Dr. Jessica Black, Associate Vice Chancellor for Rural Community and Native Education, will discuss indigenizing and decolonizing research. And then on Thursday at the Borgeson Botanical Garden, Diamond Fuller starts off the music at 6 o'clock, and he'll be followed at 7:30 by the Fairbanks Community Jazz Band. And then, as an added treat, on next Monday, down at Scheibel Auditorium, Dermot Cole will be talking with author Dan O'Neill about his new book, The Impertinent Question. And that's at 7 o'clock in Scheibel. So that's something to look forward to. UAF acknowledges the Alaska Native nations upon whose ancestral lands our campuses reside. The Trothiata campus is located on the ancestral lands of the Dene people of the lower Tanana River. And let me introduce Nicky. She was 20 years old, a natural science student, when she arrived in Fairbanks in 1974. And she says she quickly recognized Fairbanks as home. She enjoyed a wide variety of jobs during the first 10 years. For example, she taught outdoor education at UAF, planted seedlings at Ann's greenhouse, ran the offset press at Interior Graphics and Copy, supported 300 workers, and were they grateful, 300 workers in the field as an expediter for Resource Associates, and worked for Jack O'Brien at the Goldstream store. These jobs gave Nicky an insight into and an ever-deepening commitment to the broader Fairbanks community. In 1985, she joined the crew at the Berry Room at the Noelween Library, served as a storyteller and children's entertainer, and transitioned to a school librarian and eventually morphed into a classroom teacher. Along the way, she got a few degrees at UAF, raised a few phenomenal kids, donated a few organs, and now that she's retired, she spends more time on Alaska rivers and trails with her partner, Paul, and she steps in to help when needed, and it works to inspire more involvement in our local political process. Welcome, Nicky Eiseman. Now, Nicky, I want to start with your mom, because in these polarized times, we sometimes lose perspective that this country has a rich tradition going back to the Pilgrims of people fleeing political persecution and looking for a fresh start on these shores. And that was true of your mom?
Yeah. And I'm channeling my mother here. She was 4'11" and her feet never touched the ground. And mine didn't either here. So I was like, oh, I'm going to just do what my mom did. Yeah, so my mother was born in Venice, Italy in 1925. Her family was Jewish on both sides for many generations, and I tell that to people and they're like, oh no, wait, you mean your father was Jewish and your mother was Italian? And it's like, no, a rare breed, an Italian Jew, as in the Merchant of Venice. Anyway, you know, at that point, as in most of Europe, much of the Jewish community was just part and parcel of the community, whatever community they were in. And like many Jews, my parents' family were very surprised when Mussolini came into power, and after he got done making the trains run on time, began singling out Jews. And in 1938, my mother and her sister weren't allowed to go to school anymore as Jews. And my grandfather was one of 7 children, and he and my grandmother decided, paying attention to the news, looking at what was going on, that things were really not going to get any better, and they wanted to leave Italy. And they decided that, and it was at a time when they could still leave, do it in a thoughtful way. And the rest of the family, my great-grandmother apparently thought that this was ridiculous. What was he fleeing? He was breaking up the family, how dare he? And the family folklore goes that when my grandfather, Alberto, went to kiss his mother goodbye, that she turned her cheek away. Ooh. She only said, how dare he desert her? Anyway, so they went to England, and where apparently my grandfather had spent some time before, so it was going to be a familiar place. But in the transition time from Italy to England, England entered the war. So by the time they got there, they were considered enemy aliens. My grandfather was put in an internment camp, so somewhat like the Japanese.
Yeah.
Basically, even though he was Jewish, and how could he be an enemy? But by all the laws, he was an enemy. So they decided that England was not going to be a safe place for them either, and so they were able, after I think a couple years, to get passage to New York, and were not able to get direct passage. They ended up going via South America, and then finally got to New York just before the U.S. entered the war. And they, along the way, my mother did what she needed to do to fit in. She got to England, she got an English accent, and then she got to the United States, and she dropped her English accent and got an American accent. And somehow, within a very few short years of getting here, had gone to Cornell and graduated. And a pretty remarkable woman.
Yeah. But she became a writer too, right?
Yeah. She majored in government, and then I think got her first job at 17 magazine, which she had to quit when she was pregnant because you weren't allowed to be pregnant and work at 17 magazine. And she wrote my whole life. She wrote book reviews. She wrote a lot for the New York Times. If you put her name in their search bar, you get about 300 hits. She wrote any number of children's books, picture books, and many of them centered around our life, around her life as an immigrant. She wrote a lot of travel articles to Alaska.
And I just learned you two co-wrote a book.
We did. One of the chapters of my early Fairbanks life was I lived at 4 Mile Goldstream, and worked at the Goldstream store with Lisa O'Brien, who was just a wee little girl then, or it seemed like it at the time, because I was 20 and she was 12. And I lived at 4 Mile Goldstream and had, some serious homestead years, and had goats and sheep and was spinning the wool. And anyway, I wrote my mother letters, because that's how we communicated, very detailed letters about what was going on. And then she took those letters and wove them into a book. And so the book was called Gift from a Sheep. And it's about, a little girl who lives next door to a sheep farm and takes a lamb home and raises it from a bottle, and then spins, some version of what I had done. And spins it, the wool, and weaves it.
Amazing. Well, now, going back to your mom, though, from her immigrant experience, did that play any role in your upbringing?
Well, I mean, it was this proud story. It was this, being a first-generation American, knowing what being Jewish had meant for her. And both my parents were, when I look back, social justice and activism was a theme throughout, and I'm sure that played into it. I mean, both my parents were always involved in activities that were uplifting other people and shining the light, though that wasn't language they would have used then. And there's a bunch of people in this room that sort of do some political organizing with me, and bouncing back and forth between that life and this life. I am really involved in local politics, and there's a lot of people that really piss me off, and or at least in their political realm, and
Sure.
I don't. Yeah, that I'm like, I really don't want you in office. I don't feel you're a reasonable person. But I try hard to always, when they're not on the dais, to see them as human beings. I don't want anybody to villainize me, which means I can't villainize them. And I feel like, there's the unspoken lessons we learn in our homes, which are the most powerful ones.
Right.
And the unspoken lesson that I feel like I got from my mother was you don't have to like everybody, but you do need to get to know them before you decide whether you like them or not. So I think that was that would be it.
We're born in the same year.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about the early 60s,
Yeah.
which,
For a while.
yeah, not a quiet time political activism was concerned.
No.
That must have been kind of a topic around the dinner table, or
Oh.
did you attend marches? And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that. My mother and father met some really dear friends working on Adlai Stevenson's campaign, and my mother said she worked so hard on it, and this was against Eisenhower, and she was just like blown away. How could he not have won? We worked so hard. Some of us have that same feeling. But I remember my parents being devastated when, just remember, I can remember sitting on my father's shoulders, looking out over a great crowd of people. I was certainly aware when JFK was killed, when Martin Luther King was killed. My family was not directly involved in the Summer of Freedom, in '64, when so many people went to Alabama, but very dear friends were. The man who illustrated Dick from a Sheik, who was a courtroom reporter and also did books. And I would say my first action was in middle school when we still, had to wear skirts. We could wear pants under our skirts in the winter, but the rest of the time we had to wear skirts. And so, me and my buddies in middle school, we staged some sort of protest. I remember being in the office so that we could wear pants all year, and we could wear pants all, we could.
Yeah.
And lo, change happened.
Well, I just also want to point out at this time the whole music scene in Woodstock, and you were one of those people.
I did go to Woodstock.
Yeah, the billions who actually said they had, as opposed to those who were there.
No, I was there.
Yeah, no,
I know. I was 14. I got with my big sister, who was 17. We drove in my parents' pea green Volvo, and with a rounded hood, and I can remember, again, these snapshots you have, because the traffic stopped, just sitting on the hood of the Volvo, looking at this long line of traffic, of stalled traffic. Wow. And the music, and then at some point it blurs of, well, what was my experience and what was in the movie, and did I hear Richie Havens or did I just see Richie Havens?
Yeah.
But I definitely went there, and people were like, how did your mother let you go? And I was like, well, the tickets were on sale in the New York Times, and in my house, the New York Times was the Bible, and so.
So it was sanctioned.
Yeah, it was sanctioned. Totally.
The imprimatur of.
Yeah, and I wore, a dress that I had made out of an Indian print tablecloth that was worn threadbare. I see some nods, yeah.
Okay, well, that fashion statement leads me to my next question, is your dad said what ultimately led you to Alaska was Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so you were really engaged in the natural world, right?
I wasn't. I think like later in high school, I grew up in suburban Connecticut near the ocean, which was amazing. My dad took the train into New York every day. And yeah, and at some point I just, and I was like, well, what do you really know intellectually when you're 16, or what do you just feel? I just knew that that wasn't the right place for me, that much as I loved my family, like I didn't really care what kind of wine was what. I mean, and I was not particularly interested in going to college. I mean, in high school, I majored in hiking in Vermont, smoking Camel Straits, reading D.H. Lawrence, and protesting the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
We shut the high school down. And I did read a lot of Little House on the Prairie books over and over and over, and I was really fascinated by that. And just of doing things with your hands, of doing things yourself, of in the long winter, Pa and Laura sitting, twisting straw into sticks so that they could eat it. And remember, making candles in my mother's kitchen, which drove her crazy. And then I was in a car accident when I was 16, drove into a telephone pole in a Corvair, so I had to spend a lot of time in the dentist's office, and the dentist's wife was a spinner. And I started reading these spinning magazines, and it was like I wanted more of this experience, which I know doubled on my Little House fascination. And I found this place, the Albion Hills Farm School of Spinning, Weaving, and Dyeing, that would take me, and I spent, it was in Canada, and I spent time with sheep and spinning and weaving, and again, I just wanted more of that experience and to be able to do more with my hands. I mean, my family is one which put great value on intellect and on discussion, and which I appreciated, but I figured there
More
was
hands-on.
Yeah.
Well, at Antioch College, didn't you teach an outdoor education?
Yeah, so I went to Antioch begrudgingly, again, what am I doing here? And I remember sitting in philosophy of education class going, what? Who? I don't care. And then when I took the same class 20 years later, it all of a sudden made more sense. But so Antioch had this work study program, and the classes at Antioch that really resonated with me were ornithology and botany and soil science, and again, the classes of the natural world. And Antioch had a work study program, and I taught in an outdoor ed school in New Hampshire, a residential program where kids would come for a week. And it was one of those jobs where I felt I should be paying. I learned so much. And sitting on a riverbank, learning and understanding the flow and picking caddis flies up off the bottom and noticing.
Yeah.
And I think both my parents loved being outside, and anytime I'm out on the tundra with wildflowers, I'm right there with my mother and with her in the Alps, from her childhood. But I think I definitely wanted it up the next level. And I worked again on a sheep farm as part of that. And then you see Susan DeLisa back there. So part of the Antioch experience was, which she was a part of, there were these programs called environmental field programs that went to different parts of the world. And there was one to Alaska. And I had never thought about Alaska, but I had a friend who looked at a really old map once and said, can you imagine going to a place where you just don't know what's, where the end of the map just sort of dissolves.
Unknown territory.
Unknown territory unless you happen to be indigenous to that spot, but yeah. So, yeah, there was the opportunity to go to Alaska, and there were 12 of us, plus some hangers-on, and we drove up and had an amazing summer, and
And where was this? Where were you guys?
so this was 1974, so 50 years ago, and we were in the interior, and I describe it as, kneeling at the feet of the greats. Like, we met Bryna Kessel and Dave Klein in all his youthful glory, and I remember Dave saying, there is no balance in nature, only fluctuation, and just that it is. Dave Klein, Majesty, and Dave Murray.
Prophetic voice.
Exactly, Dave Murray, who was the botanist at the university. And so we did some work for them, and we connected with Jack Lewick, who started IAB and had the Reindeer Research Station in Cantwell. We had an incredible chunk of time on the North Slope. We flew to Barter Island and then walked across the North Slope, got to be in the middle of caribou migration. Like, I feel like in those years, I have these series of just 3 months that were like a lifetime packed into 3 months.
Sure sounds like it.
Anyway, that was time to leave, and the next semester, the next quarter was a work quarter, and our vehicle broke down in Cantwell, and we already had a connection in Cantwell from the Jack Lewick connection and the Reindeer Research Station, and it took 3 weeks to get parts. And because it was 1974.
Yeah.
And in those 3 weeks, my friend Maggie and I took a job in the Cantwell Bar and Cafe. And
Not the work-study program they were probably thinking.
No, certainly not what my parents were thinking.
Yeah.
But again, that was like 3 months of just life-changing experience, and on so many levels, living in the little dry cabin and splitting wood and hauling water. And also, and this is Cantwell, not Cantwell on the highway, but Cantwell back by the railroad, because the highway had just opened up. So there was back there, a bar and a cafe, and a washateria, Marsha, what else was there? And it was all run by the Cotter family, and it was wild.
Yeah.
And I had never flipped a burger before. And because that was not the path that I was on, as, I was supposed to go to Dartmouth like my father and grandfather. And working in the bar, watching people come in sober and leave drunk, that was a whole other thing as well. And anyway, at the end of that, I made my way back to Ohio, called my parents and said I'm not going back to college, and they said, oh, we'll come home and we'll talk about that. And I said, no, I've already got your refund money, it's all good, it's okay. And they said, and I said, I'm going to go back to Alaska, and they were like, well, we're not going to help you. I was like, well, that's okay, and I scooped ice cream for the winter, and then came back the next spring.
And you talked about landing in Goldstream Valley.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where you were when you co-wrote, sent those letters
Yes.
to your mom.
Yes, yeah.
So you cite a number of people and experiences at that time.
Yeah.
And you lived in a converted greenhouse. So going back to the earth really had some meaning for you.
I did.
So what were some of the highlights from those years for you?
Well, I mean, again, it's like, how much life can you pack into that little time? Yeah, I mean, and it seems like when I met that point, maybe I'm 21, and how conscious are your choices, or how do you find yourself somewhere? And so I found myself living at 4 Mile Gulfstream, and my boyfriend and I built. We took a greenhouse, and
how big was the
it
greenhouse?
was just a little greenhouse.
Okay.
It was just a greenhouse, and and with the help of John Garrity, that might be a name some people know, and his father, we lifted up one of the walls and put in a pony wall, and and built a barn out of timbers that we stole from the Alyeska pipe yard, and, because they didn't need them, I'm sure.
Statute of limitations is over on
Yeah,
that.
and, you know, had a huge garden, and at the same time, I worked at Ann's Greenhouse with Cindy Tack and Joe Scott and Gianna Drogeo, like, and Glenn Homer, like, how did that just happen? And, but I feel like I got a great jump start on Alaskan gardening. You know, it can be quite a learning curve, but that was great. Yeah, I worked at the Goldstream store with.
And it had the only phone, right?
It was the only phone in the valley, and so a lot of phone calls of consequence were made on that. I never knew quite whether to desk closer to the phone, you know, or further from the phone. And I met John Manthei then, because he was building these beautiful cases. At that point, Jack had in the store a case full of ivory and then a whole wall full of furs and smoked hen moose hide. And it was held up at gunpoint because it was the middle of the pipeline and there was all this ivory there. And I met so many, you know, I met the Triple Horns, they were customers, and Sarah Cabot was just also a little girl. And somewhere in there, and you know, it's hard to sort it out, I met Marilyn Gordon Herod, who, like, that was a mind-blowing experience. And I remember going to their house and they had a food co-op. What was a food co-op, right? And we would all order in bulk, and their house at that point was pretty small, and there were, I remember, stairs going up to a loft, that it was just like a little hole that you would go through. And I'm sure there are plenty of people here that know Marilyn, and her grandson, Sam, is my son's age, and spent a lot of time under my umbrella, under my wings, and he was just here visiting, and he's now 38, like my son, and I was telling him about these early years with his grandmother, and who was so different from my mother. And
well, you also had some jobs,
she would bring up, but this is like, you know, I'm not in Westport, Connecticut anymore. She'd bring up a tray full of mugs, and I'm not even going to call them mismatched. It was just like this array of mugs made by people that she knew and loved, you know, as part of this whole food co-op experience, and somebody's local homemade honey and herbal tea, and just so many experiences that were so unlike what I had come from and so much what I wanted. And part of the experience too of, you know, getting to Fairbanks, or getting to Alaska and being like, nobody cared where you'd gone to school. Nobody cared who you knew. Nobody cared what kind of car you drove. It was like, you could just be like, well, I want to do that. It's like, okay, you seem like you can do it, and there's nobody else to do it, so go for it. And Terry Reichert was my neighbor, and you know, what an amazing opportunity to have her for a neighbor. And you know, in talking to you or thinking about this and maybe getting older, whatever, you realize that there are people that mentored you that didn't know they were mentoring you, and perhaps vice versa. Perhaps I am, I don't know, it swings both ways, but.
Yeah. Well, you also listed an intriguing body of work experience too while you were there. I want to hear as an expediter, and then how that leads into running a press.
Well, Lonnie and Bonnie Heiner were my neighbors in Goldstream, and they ran Research Associates, and they needed an expediter. So, yeah, okay. And that was great. Again, you know, it was in the mid to late 70s, and I had my seafoam green F-150 pickup, and people out in the field. You know, it was an exploration company, and groceries to buy and radios for the HT220s and colored pencils because every map was colored by hand then, and fuel to pump for helicopters. And I was pretty sure I was pretty tough out there, you know, pumping the helicopter fuel. So I did that. And then I would go into interior graphics and copy because they would do copy work for us. And my father worked in the printing industry. And I was like, oh, what's this all? I mean, he didn't run the presses, but I certainly knew about press work and about quality printing and paper and all those things. And so it's like, well, I'm going to learn how to do this. So I learned how to run the offset press and learned some basic lessons in graphic design, which I carry forward, like a little more space at the bottom of the page at the top, don't use more than 2 fonts. And then once I had figured out how to use it, I was like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to work here anymore.
Yeah. Well, you know, in those days, it was remarkable because you could sort of land in doing stuff that you never thought you would do.
Right.
And learn, hey, I like this.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an amazing time.
And then I don't even know how I get into this, but I worked for Tanana Chiefs in their agriculture program. I was an agriculture assistant for the Tok sub-region, so I had 5 villages that I went to, Tok, Tetland, Tanacross, Eagle, and I arrived with my big Troy-built rototiller and seeds, and again, I probably learned more than I dispensed. A great moment, you know, because I had worked at the Gulfstream store for Jack, and one of the things of great value that he sold was smoked tanned moose hide, which is moose hide that's been, you know, tanned with brains and urine and worked, and it makes this very soft, pliable moose hide that is great for beating, and it's incredibly labor intensive. And I was watching this woman sitting, this was in Northway, and she seemed very old to me at the time. I had no idea how old she was. And she was scraping and working, and I'm just peppering her with questions. And she finally stops, and she looks at me. She says, "My people learn by watching."
Yeah. Well, one of the jobs that you took led to the Berry Room of the Nolene Library. How did you land that gig?
So I went from that agriculture program with Tanana Chiefs to working for them for a couple of years on a publication called Kunitzu, which was funded by their Department of Alcohol Prevention, and it was a publication that 3 of us collaboratively created, and went out to all the villages in the interior, and we had students, kids contributed things, their stories, and we illustrated it. And then I was pregnant with Lily, and at that point I thought, I was kind of done with that job, didn't really know what I was going to do next. I bought Cobra Insurance and quit. And thought, well, I'm going to go back to work. I'm ready to go back to work. And then, I mean, I really did grow up steeped in children's literature. And, I mean, my mother was a children's book author. Maurice Sendak signed my cast when I broke my leg when I was 9. And I threw it away. And I was, you know, I had been in and out of the Berry Room, and I was really drawn to it, and applied, wasn't hired, I did some volunteer work, and, you know, was hired. And I mean, I don't, Marcia, you maybe remember more about what took me there, but anyway, I was incredibly fortunate to land to work in the Berry Room, and to work when Sue Sheriff was there, and I feel like to cast aspersions on the Berry Room now, but it really was the golden age of the Berry Room.
Mhm.
And I got to hold court in preschool story time, and that was when you could sit in front of the
For
mural.
the mural. Yeah,
With the
big
story head, and all the Paris kids came, Todd's kids, and many people that then, I think that's when I first met Hannah Pendergrast, when she was just this little wave, we're talking 40 years ago, wave mop of angelic curls, and it was great.
Well,
And then also, and I had been doing some community theater. I was in Pirates of Penzance and Teresa. Yeah,
this is
anyway,
Flop Production.
Flop
You were on
Productions.
Riverdance when I first met you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
River Song. I was.
River Song.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And pregnant with Lily, and I didn't know it at the time. And we went on to several different levels of competition, and won a regional competition, so I kept having to sort of change my costume.
That was her first experience of being on stage,
Yes,
wasn't it?
right, she's avoided it
Yeah.
ever since. But when you want to be in a play, you don't always get the role that you want. And I was always sort of like, I never got a lead, I was always like just the chorus member with a few extra lines. And then working in the Berry Room, it was really at the time of a renaissance of storytelling, in a renaissance in this country. And Sue Sheriff was like, and Marcia Trainer, who was, had been really working on storytelling and had gone for some training and come back, and I was really intrigued. And Sue was like, okay, well now it's your turn. It's like, put the book down. And I was really intimidated, and she said, no, you know some stories. And I was like, oh, okay, sure enough, I could tell 3 Billy Goats Rock, And that was this whole great chapter that sort of combined, okay, well, I can't get the part that I want, but in storytelling, I can make the part that I want. And so there were 4 or 5 of us, Cheryl Bidwell, Marcia, who's here, Nicky Andrews, and we had a storytelling troupe. And for a couple of years, we did a lot of performances.
Yeah.
And Chris
You did
Wilson.
some radio work
We
too?
did some radio work, we did some radio performances, yeah, Star Mother's Youngest Child, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and also at the same time, some children's theater. I ran that along with Karen Stomberg, and again, Marcia, we had like a full season for a couple of years of children's productions,
Yeah.
which was really great. And another great lesson I would try to remember there is, it was fine when I had 1 kid, and then all of a sudden I had 2 kids, and I'm trying to run this children's theater series. And I said to a friend, I was like, more people need to volunteer. And she said, you can't make people volunteer. All you can do is decide not to. And that was great. And I have sort of now, oh my gosh, see, Dawn is right back there, Dawn Pendergrast. And for me, that's become, because I do a lot, I put a lot of energy into trying to get people elected, and it's an endless task. And it's like, okay, sometimes it's okay to put the bucket down, and if it's important enough, somebody else is going to pick the bucket up. And if not, then maybe it wasn't.
Well, we'll get to that
Yeah.
piece of your work in a minute, but I do want to, since a couple of the Triceratops are here,
Yeah.
acknowledge that treating the Triceratops,
You should stand probably, right?
this is your night. Yeah, it sounds like it's time to get the band together
I know.
again. Anyway, but you guys went down to Homer, I think, and performed, and you got to meet a real paleontologist, Jack Warner, was it?
We did.
Yeah.
Well, so we were, for those who are not initiated, once So the library summer reading program is a big deal, and there was a dinosaur theme one year, and Julia and Marcia and not quite Vicky at the time, another woman, Paula, put together this band, Trina and the Triceratops. And we were either an all-girl dinosaur rock group or an all-dinosaur group. Anyway,
It worked, whatever.
it was incredibly fun. And yeah, we performed for several years, and we did go down to Homer. It was about the oddest thing. And performed in conjunction with Jack Horner, who was, I guess, the advisor for the Jurassic Park movies. And then we also opened for, I can't remember his name, but it was a fundraiser for the Alaska Library Association. And it was a guy who had been on Prairie Home Companion, and we were opening. And yes, I was in labor, but the show went on.
I know, but it was well beloved. And
It was very well beloved.
Dermot made me ask about it. He says,
Okay.
oh, you gotta ask her about it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to then segue, you became a school librarian
Mhm.
and eventually a teacher,
Yeah,
which was another career shift, but took a lot of, a big chunk of your history there. I mean, you were doing that kind of work for a while.
yeah, oh yeah, many years. And I mean, it felt like it all sort of mushed together. But yeah, I worked in the Berry Room for 5 years, and then honestly, I mean, it's an amazing job, but once my kids got in school, I wanted to be on the school schedule. And so I got a job with Barnett, and I was working part-time for many years there, and so hard to find a part-time position, so I moved to many different schools. And they ended up going, Birch was a K-1-2 school, and then I forget what was next. That was, Arctic Lakes, so that was K-6, and then I moved to a middle school, and then ended up at West Valley for 7 years. And, you know, at every point, sort of afraid of the next group of kids, the next older, and it all worked out fine. And, you know, the wisdom of children, I remember working at middle school and telling Lily, my daughter, who was the same age, I said, well, I don't mind, you know, bailing out kids. I don't mind helping kids, going the extra mile for kids who have been keeping up on their project and working on it all along, but I'm not going to bail somebody out who's just, you know, coming to me at the last minute. She was like, Mom, you have no idea how hard it is to ask an adult for help. If somebody asks that, you help. I was like, okay.
Wow. Mentored by your child.
Oh, very much,
Yeah.
very much, yeah, yeah. And that was wonderful work, and, you know, focused much more on storytelling for the, you know, for the younger kids, and I did a lot of read aloud, and I feel like that's really important because learning to read is hard.
Yep.
And so if you can take those black spots on the page and help kids see how wonderful it is to be able to learn to read.
Well, to open the whole world of imagination and to be able to experience other people, other situation, I think is a
Exercise your heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It makes you a little more compassionate, I hope.
And then being at West Valley when my kids were there was great. I mean, I was there for the Lily's last year and then all of Jack's years, and just to be able to hang with them. And at that point I realized I was the person you could come to when you needed help, and somebody would come in frantic and breathing shallowly, and it's like, okay, take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay, you know,
We got this.
We got it, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And teaching, you know, I think that's one of the hardest jobs around. And teachers get such grief,
Yeah.
you know, and so, but you have to be there. You know, you think, oh, it's just what, you know, a 9 to 4, 9 to 3 job. Not so.
No, not at all, yeah. So I, at that point, was working full-time, and I had thought about getting, I did finally go back to college at some point, and I got an English degree, and part of the reason I did English rather than teaching is that the education department had just lost its accreditation. Like, okay, fine. But I also, which maybe we'll get to or not, but had a child who was chronically ill, and that was kind of my part-time job. So things sort of got settled out there, and I was working full-time. And then in 2008, the economy crashed, and there was the stimulus funds, and I was able to go back to school with some of that stimulus funds, and so I actually went back on the school district dime. It was an incredible opportunity where I was able to keep working, do my student teaching, all of it. Take classes, student teaching. Yeah, I mean, it was wild. It was a crazy time.
Yeah.
But that was really fortunate. And then I ended up teaching, bounced around a little bit as you do as a new teacher, but then ended up at Anlene for 5 years and really always threaded through, but really in my last years, the whole, as much of the natural world, as much citizen science as I could possibly do, worked with Jan Dawn, Project One Tree, and Katie Spellman, and did a lot of art, and I think I had a pretty rich classroom. Yeah, and I was definitely mentored by people like Judy Schiffler, who always ran, who Lily had for 2 years and always, ran, and Susan Campbell, and people who gave so much and were so creative.
Well, you mentioned your kids, so let's go there. Lily and Jack, amazing kids. But when did you first learn that Jack had that chronic kidney condition?
Lily was 4.
4.
Yeah, and it, turned us on our head for a little bit.
Well, yeah, it's every parent dreads that kind of information.
Yeah. I don't know how much to go into all that.
Well, just learning how to cope on that. You've just outlined your not inconsiderable work schedule, and to suddenly have this medical condition loom up must have been staggering.
It was. And I remember that, so Jack was born with, chronic renal insufficiency, which we didn't figure out till he was 4, and so we, Mary and Alan McFarland were his doctors, and we got incredible care, and it was like, okay, he's gonna need surgery, and we went to Seattle and did that, and I'm like, okay, well now can he get off his high blood pressure medicine, which he had to go on, and it was like, well, yeah, when he's 80, and I think that was the first thing, real that, this is a lifelong thing, and that my mother wanted me to come back to Yale for the surgery, and I remember being told, well, wherever you choose to go, you're going to be going back. I was like, what? This isn't one and done? Mm-hmm. And so it was always on the back burner, at a simmer, and then sometimes it comes crashing forward, and at a full boil, and it's not in a little pot, it's on, and all of a sudden your little camp stove has become an industrial stove, and it's taking all the burners and slopping every way, and then trying to remember that it's going to simmer, and that it's, and that it's going to go back, and and
well, the thing about that I recall is that eventually there was that whole search for a donor for Jack, for a donation of a kidney.
Round one. Yeah.
And he subsequently had another one recently, not that long ago.
Yeah.
But so then that's a huge kind of production, right? Trying to find who was a good match for him.
Yeah. And we were actually incredibly fortunate in that we had phenomenal care from Children's Hospital, and they were able to lay out the future for us. And it's like, okay, his kidney health has reached this point where he either needs to be on dialysis or another kidney. And once you get a transplant, you kind of stop growing because the immunosuppressants also stop you from growing. So he was on dialysis all through high school, and that was so he could keep growing. And he did peritoneal dialysis, so yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, every night at home, he was hooked up to a machine for 8 hours, and you just try and carry on like it's normal. And he tried.
Well, I just want to point out, I had a chance to see him play soccer.
Yeah.
And just such a graceful and beautiful athlete to watch. So he still had such a rich and engaging life.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that I have, well, one of the pieces of why I really advocate for education is because music was incredibly important in his life, and he started, in 4th grade playing clarinet, which segued into saxophone, and then the Muldoonies, some people here are going to remember the Muldoonies, the hot high school band, and that was all based on, what he started doing in 4th grade. And I mean, yeah, he was still he still has a lot of athletic grace, but he certainly couldn't, he was really anemic through much of elementary school and high school, and certainly couldn't live up to that potential. And yeah, I mean, it was just great that our schools offered many outlets for kids.
Right. Well, and you were kind of prepped to donate your kidney for him because you had been a bone marrow donor before. And so it's just, when I asked you about it, you didn't flinch for a second. There wasn't an instant's pause where you're going to save somebody's life. End of story. I mean, there was just no question about it, was it for you? Yeah. Enough said. All right. Yeah.
Well, we were just talking about, I do have this tendency, for better or worse, to step in.
Right.
And there was a need, and I could do it. So, I did it.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And I think at about the same time, Jean Cape, I know there are people here who know Jean, I can't remember what disease she had, but she was getting a bone marrow transplant, and so I sort of prepped for it. I mean, it was just something that I knew about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, the little girl who initially started the drive, I'm sure there are people here who remember, it would have been 35 years ago, she was a 2nd grader at Wood River, and she sat next to my daughter's best friend, and you just can only imagine it being your child. And so there was really a community outpouring of people that did give samples at that point, and she got a donor from somewhere else, but again, all your DNA material, it stays on file.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump up just a little bit ahead because I want to keep this, because I think healthcare in this country is such, I don't quite understand it, but a polarized discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people are one paycheck away from, being on the street. And when a health crisis like a chronic kidney condition, it's disaster. I mean, they'll be in bankruptcy, and it could have ramifications. Did that, in some sense, inform you at all while were you thinking about that when the Affordable Care Act or any of these things come up down the line?
I mean, because, I was incredibly fortunate. I feel myself to be an incredibly fortunate person. I was working for this, in general, and working for the school district when Jack really, I always had good health care. And the school district would pay us to go to Seattle. And our insurance, and but also knew that Jack never had the luxury of, I'm going to take a gap year, or I'm going to do whatever kind of job I want. He always knew that he was gonna have to go from high school to college to a job, to a career that was gonna give him health care. You know, unfortunately, he was able to.
Went into the medical field.
It's one of those things when I look at, I wanna, when people are like blasé about who to vote for, or why, whether your vote matters or whether elections matter or not. And it's like, oh, you're on your parents' health care till you're 26.
Yeah,
That was legislation.
Yeah.
That was something people voted on.
yeah.
And yes.
Okay, well, let's transition then to this kind of social engagement. You mentioned your mom and something she shared with you that you shared with me that stuck with me is you don't have to like everybody, but you should get to know them before you make a decision whether to like them or not. And I think so often in our political discourse today, because we have our silos, we have our websites we go to, we have our news sources, that engagement, that human factor of reaching across to somebody who may not think entirely the same as you is really a fragile and diminishing resource we have. What do you think?
Oh, I'm kind of Pollyanna.
That's a little house on the prairie reading you have, right?
I mean, I'm sorry if this is, sounds so canned, but I don't do despair well. And so, how do I avoid that? What can I do? And I try and minimize the amount of time I spend despairing. And what can I do? And I think I spend a fair bit of time trying to have conversations with people.
Yeah, you're fearless about that. You will go up to people.
I kind of.
Not everybody's that comfortable. Yeah, but that's a great gift.
I don't know, hopefully the best we can do is soften around the edges and find some point of contact that you might then be able to, of course I'm right, sway somebody to my side. But then also to be open to what somebody is saying that maybe doesn't sound good the first time, that there may be some validity to,
Right. So, do you have, would you offer pointers, Nikki, about how to, seriously, I'm totally serious here because, I have my little silo that I do. Luckily, my job and my experience leads me into a broad range of people, and so I get to know them as individuals.
Right.
And for me, that's incredibly helpful because they're just human beings. They're just like us. They think differently than us, but you can't,
again, without sounding too Pollyanna-ish, I'm not always successful, but I do try to avoid thinking too much about them and us and sides. And, I put a lot of energy into local municipal elections, races, because we can affect them. And our local races are nonpartisan. And I've a number of times like, no, we're not going to talk about sides here, or we're not going to talk about parties, and we're approaching things differently. And there's some people that, I think I'm not going to give them the time of day. But there are, plenty of people who maybe we don't vote the same way, but, there is still conversation to be had and still a little bit of common ground there between us. That we can start from. I don't know, I guess that would be, on a good day, to try and see that.
Yeah. Well, now that you're retired, so you and Paul are gonna travel more, or are you gonna be at the polls more volunteering? You know, what's ahead for you?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna say, you know, more of the same, probably some combination of adventuring and community, and I mean, Paul and I have 8 grandchildren between us, so lots of opportunities
Yeah.
to play with kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been great to do more traveling, to travel,
Yeah.
you know, in this country, to travel in other countries, to, of all kinds,
Right.
you know.
Well, about this time every evening, I open it up to anybody who happen to know from the audience who has a story or a question. And there are a few here. So does anybody have a question or a memory that they want to share about?
I mean, I really feel like my whole, like, 50 years of my life is in this. Really? So, like, thank you.
Judy?
Do your eight grandkids live in the U.S. or do any of them live elsewhere?
4 here in Fairbanks, and both Jack and Lily are in Burlington right now, so 4 in Burlington. So yeah, Lily was in Germany for 7 years, and then came here, yeah. And was in Brooklyn, initially her family was in Brooklyn, and then they evacuated to Burlington during COVID, and seem to have, I don't know if that's permanent, but yeah.
Refugees again.
Yeah, exactly, I know, it's a theme, it's a theme.
Anybody else?
Can you tell us briefly about the hike that you and Paul did this year in Europe?
Oh, well.
The hike you and Paul took in Europe.
So, yeah, we walked the Portuguese Camino de Santiago, so from mostly from Porto up to Santiago de Compostela, and it was amazing. And for, like, you get up every day, and you eat, and you poop, and then you walk all day. You want to get that out of the way.
Note to self, okay.
But I mean, I am a really curious, not nosy. And so you're just walking through this incredible variety of countryside. I mean, some of it's rural, some of it's suburb isn't the right word, I know, hamlets by the ocean, and just so much just to look at and see every day, and stories to spin, you know, like, oh, I see that this wine estate is completely deserted, and how dare those children leave, but well, maybe they didn't leave, it's okay that they left. You can always do what your parent, you know, so just all the great, yeah, so that was just, to me, an incredibly wonderful way to travel. Yeah.
Some of the places I would consider traveling. Mussolini didn't give up the Jews right away. I mean, then Hitler got over.
Right.
South of the Gothic line, Firenze,
Right.
in southern Italy, the Jews, better than anywhere in Europe, they had their towns, they had to kind of stay put. They had their synagogues, they were Christianity, they were people. And I've read a few books, I'm not Jewish, but I cried my way through the books.
Right.
And that's just, where in Italy were you born?
Well, my mother, not me, I was born in Venice, Venezia.
Venice.
Sono Veneziana.
I like Venice in more of the 60s.
Yeah.
But one thing I do when I'm in Italy, I look for Stolperstein. You know what those are? Little brass plaques.
Oh, yeah.
They started in the early 90s. They're scattered all over Italy and other places. And these Jewish people were taken from this house. They Auschwitz. This is specific. And they're just, at first they resisted, but they're there, that's real history.
Yeah.
And you walk on the sidewalks in Milano and Rome and a lot of places. Go see the Stolperstein.
Yeah.
Go find the towns in southern Italy where the Jews are.
Well, I'm going to be in southern Italy in September, so I will.
Yeah, Rich.
I just have, I'm so full of what I would like to say here, but I just think it's marvelous that you were the last one in this series because you're kind of the common denominator of everybody in the room. There's somebody that, I mean, the fact that I always learn so much about the people who have been through these lectures. There's just a magic, and it's all my generation mostly, and I'm so grateful for it. And when I learned about you, I didn't know you were Jewish. It doesn't surprise me.
Oh, wait, I didn't see the stare for the
all these inferences, all these people that it's so symptomatic of living here your whole life and why you came to Alaska and how you came to Alaska, and everybody's just sort of mixed in here. And thanks for everything you've done, because if there's one thing that I can count on you being, it's not what you said, you don't do despair. I've never heard you say a discouraging word about any activism that we undertook. And thank you for everything.
Wow,
Yeah.
I can't, that's a great question.
Go, yeah.
One more thing. I wonder if, in closing, we could have a dinosaur song sing-along.
The answer is no, Don. You have to pay the band, my friend. But you're welcome to sing out there, you know. Nicky, thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry.
Rich referred to all us being a same generation, but I imagine that it would be hard for you to comprehend how many people who grew up in this town remember you, how many thousands. When you were a librarian
Yeah.
at West Valley, my son was there, and you know, normally the image of a librarian is back in some corner and you
Right.
barely ever talk to her. Well, everybody knew West Valley's librarian and loved her, and my son, now 36, remembers Nicky Eiseman.
Thank you.
Yeah, librarians, let's hear it. The librarians.